My sister-in-law told me to stop contacting my niece because her daughter needed to learn the harsh reality of living in the shadows. My older brother Soren's wife, Elena, suffered a severe nervous breakdown 10 years ago. She had been at a downtown branch of our local credit union to deposit a check when two men walked in with shotguns. It wasn't a movie. It was 6 minutes of screaming, people on the floor, a gun pressed to the back of the security guard's head, and Elena hiding under a customer service desk, listening to what she thought was going to be a massacre. Nobody died that day, but something in Elena did. She developed crippling agoraphobia. When I say crippling, I don't mean she gets nervous in crowds. I mean she hasn't stepped off her front porch in 9 years. There is a literal line where the gray painted wood of the porch meets the concrete of the top step, and Elena's toes have not crossed it since Mia was 3 years old. She manages remote freelance graphic design work and raises Mia from inside a meticulously climate-controlled, heavily curtained 2-story house. Soren couldn't handle it. He tried for 3 years. He paid for the therapists who did home visits, he bought the noise-canceling headphones, he installed the blackout blinds, but the isolation ate him alive. He started staying late at work, then going out for drinks, and eventually, he filed for divorce when Mia was 4. He moved to Seattle and essentially became a holiday card father. That left our family to rally around Elena. We became her lifeline to the outside world. I was the one bringing groceries on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sitting on her couch, drinking stale coffee, and pretending it was totally normal that the front blinds were drawn shut on a beautiful July afternoon. I always had a special bond with Mia. Even when she was tiny, she was fiercely intelligent, with this restless, vibrating energy. She was obsessed with the outdoors. She was constantly staring up at the sky, pointing out cloud formations from the living room window, trying to trace constellations through the glass. When she turned 8, she desperately wanted to join a local astronomy club led by a woman named Adele, who ran observation nights out at the state park. Elena physically could not leave her house to take her. The state park was 20 miles away, out in the pitch-black countryside. The thought of an open, dark field with no walls and no locked doors triggered massive panic attacks just talking about it. Elena cried in the kitchen, hyperventilating while holding a permission slip she couldn't use. I stepped up. I told Elena I would do the driving. Elena agreed, but only under strict conditions. I had to keep my phone on speaker on the dashboard for the entire drive there, and the entire drive home. She needed to hear the tires on the road, needed to hear our voices, needed to know nothing had happened. That first night under the stars, Mia was mesmerized. Adele showed her how to align a Dobsonian telescope, and when Mia saw the rings of Saturn for the first time, she actually stopped breathing for a second. That single trip turned into a weekly tradition. I became the bridge between Mia and the universe. I took her to midnight meteor showers, weekend geology hikes to collect quartz, and eventually, when she was 10, a week-long space camp in Huntsville. Elena desperately wished she could create these memories. I knew that. I tried to be hypersensitive to her pain. I bought Elena an iPad specifically so we could FaceTime her from the summits of our hikes. Whenever Mia looked through a viewfinder, I made sure she described exactly what she was seeing to her mother through the screen. I never posted a single picture on Instagram or Facebook because I knew seeing us out in the world felt like a knife twisting in Elena's ribs. I constantly reminded Mia to bring her mom souvenirs, a cool rock, a pamphlet, a freeze-dried ice cream sandwich. But the dynamic fractured 5 months ago. Mia is 12 now, and brilliant. She was accepted into an advanced junior astrophysics seminar at the local university, taught by a Professor Declan. It was a huge deal. It required driving her to the campus every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Once again, I became the default chauffeur. After a month of the seminar, things started to shift. Mia would come home, burst through the front door, and rush past her mother to show me her star charts. She would excitedly recount Professor Declan's lectures to me, talking about orbital mechanics and spectroscopy, while Elena sat quietly on the couch. Elena was completely left out of the academic language we shared. She couldn't visualize the lecture hall. She didn't know what Declan looked like. She didn't know the smell of the chalk dust, or the way the projector hummed. I was the one inhabiting Mia's world. Elena was just the waiting room. The breaking point was the Regional Science Symposium in early May. Mia spent weeks building a scale model of a Mars rover in Elena's living room. It was intricate, built from servo motors and 3D printed wheels. The exhibition hall was at the County Convention Center, packed with hundreds of people, echoing voices, harsh fluorescent lights, and zero clear exit routes. A nightmare scenario for Elena. I attended in person. I stood in the crowd, holding my phone up so Elena could watch the live stream of the judging. I kept the camera steady for an hour. When the judges walked up to the podium and awarded Mia the $500 first place grant, they handed her a microphone. Mia beamed. She looked incredibly grown up standing there. She leaned into the mic and said, "I want to thank my Aunt Clara. She's the one who showed me the universe. She's my absolute rock." Mia didn't mention her mother. I stared at my phone screen. I watched the FaceTime call disconnect instantly. Just a black screen reflecting my own horrified face. When I dropped Mia off that night, Elena was waiting in the kitchen. The house was pitch black, except for the small light over the stove. She didn't hug Mia. She didn't ask to see the ribbon or the oversized novelty check. She just pointed at the hallway and sent Mia straight to bed. The moment Mia's bedroom door clicked shut, Elena lost it. She didn't yell. Yelling would have felt less dangerous. She spoke in a venomous, tight whisper, her hands gripping the edge of the kitchen island so hard her knuckles were stark white. She accused me of weaponizing her mental illness to steal her child. She said I was intoxicating Mia with a glamorous, expansive life that purposely made her own home feel like a prison. She told me I was playing the savior, feeding my own ego while reminding Mia every single day of what her mother was incapable of doing. Then she delivered the line that still echoes in my head. "She is my blood, Clara, not yours. You need to stop dragging her into the light when you know damn well I have to live in the dark." Elena demanded I step back completely. She said Mia needed to accept that her life would be quieter, smaller, and restricted, because that was their reality. She told me my charity was actually destroying their family. I left in tears. I sat in my car in her driveway for 20 minutes, just shaking. I didn't want to cause a permanent fracture. I loved Mia, but she was Elena's daughter. I didn't have legal rights. I didn't have custody. If I pushed back, Elena could cut me off completely, and then Mia would have no one. So I did exactly what she asked. I stopped coming over for the university lectures. I called Mia and made up lies about mandatory overtime at the accounting firm where I work. I told her I couldn't do Tuesdays and Thursdays anymore. I heard the sharp, sudden intake of breath on the phone. I heard the disappointment crush her, but I held the line. Mia's spark visibly dulled over the next few months. Without me to drive her, she couldn't get to the campus. She had to drop out of Professor Declan's seminar. When I did come over, strictly for short mandated family visits, I saw her telescope sitting abandoned in the corner of her bedroom, draped with a sweater. She stopped talking about space. She stopped asking to go outside. She just sat on the couch with Elena, watching television in the dim light, getting quieter and quieter. The inevitable collision happened last weekend during our family's Sunday brunch. We always hosted it at Elena's house, specifically because she couldn't go to a restaurant. It was just me, Elena, and Mia. We were eating eggs and toast in agonizing silence. The tension in the house had become an actual physical weight. Then the doorbell rang. Elena flinched. She always does. I got up to answer it. It was a mail carrier in his blue uniform, holding a scanner, requiring a signature for a certified letter. I signed for it and brought the thick envelope into the dining room, handing it to Elena. It was addressed to Mia from the National Youth STEM Coalition. It was the decision letter for a prestigious summer residential academy in Washington, D.C. that Mia had dreamt about all year. Mia stood up from the table. She took the envelope from her mother's hands before Elena could even process the return address. Mia ripped it open. She read the single page. I watched her shoulders drop. It was a rejection, but it wasn't a standard rejection. Mia didn't drop the paper. She kept reading the bottom paragraph, her eyes tracking the lines twice, 3 times. What does it say? I asked gently. Mia looked up. At the bottom of the letter was an administrative note stating the application was denied due to an incomplete file, specifically a missing parental consent and liability form. Mia slowly turned to her mother. The silence in the room was deafening. You hid the forms? Mia's voice didn't crack. It was terrifyingly flat. Elena wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at her plate, her breathing suddenly shallow and rapid. It was in Washington, Mia. I couldn't go. I couldn't be there if something happened. It wasn't safe. It's a secure campus, Mia said. Aunt Clara was going to fly with me. I am your mother, Elena said, her voice rising, a tremor of panic bleeding into her tone. I can't have you 1,000 miles away. I can't protect you there. The world isn't safe, Mia. You don't understand what can happen. Mia didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at her mother with a cold, hollow expression that aged her 10 years in a matter of seconds. You don't want me to be safe, Mia said. You just want me to be trapped. Mia turned around, walked down the hall, and went into her bedroom. We heard drawers opening. We heard the metallic zip of a duffel bag. Elena panicked. She stood up, knocking her chair backward onto the hardwood floor. She grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. Clara, go in there. Go talk to her. Tell her she can't do this. Tell her to stop. I looked at Elena. I looked at the fear in her eyes, the genuine terror. But then I looked down the hall. Mia walked out of her bedroom carrying a dark blue backpack stuffed so full the zipper was splitting. She didn't look at either of us. She walked straight past her mother, opened the heavy oak front door, and stepped out onto the porch. She didn't stop at the edge of the gray painted wood. She walked straight down the concrete steps, out onto the sunny sidewalk, and stood next to the passenger side of my car. She waited for me to unlock it. Elena stood in the doorway, hyperventilating. She was sobbing, calling Mia's name, begging her to come back inside. But Elena's toes stayed exactly on the line. She couldn't cross the threshold. Even with her daughter leaving, she couldn't step into the light. I didn't say a word to Elena. I pulled my keys out of my pocket, walked out the door, and clicked the unlock button. Mia got in. I got in the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb, leaving Elena alone in the quiet house. We drove in total silence for the first 10 minutes. Mia just stared out the window, her jaw clenched, her hands gripping the straps of her backpack in her lap. I didn't ask where we were going. There was only one place to go. I took her to my apartment. When we got inside, Mia sat down on my sofa and didn't move. She didn't take her shoes off. She just sat there, looking at the blank television screen. I went into the kitchen and poured her a glass of water. My hands were shaking so badly I spilled some on the counter. My phone started ringing. It was Elena. I silenced it. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Elena again. I silenced it again. Over the next hour, she called 26 times. She filled my voicemail box with escalating audio of her weeping, demanding I bring Mia back, threatening to call the police and report me for kidnapping. She's not going to call the police, Mia said quietly from the living room. I walked out of the kitchen. How do you know? Because if she calls the police, they'll come to the house. They'll make her open the door. They'll ask her to come down to the station to file a report. She won't do it. Mia took a sip of the water. Her eyes were completely dry. She's just going to call my dad. My stomach dropped. Soren hadn't been to this state in 4 years. He sent child support, he sent a check for Mia's birthday, and he called on Christmas. That was the extent of his fatherhood. At 4 p.m. my phone rang again. It wasn't Elena's number. It was a Seattle area code. I answered it. Soren, Clara, what the hell are you doing? Soren's voice was sharp, laced with the kind of false authority people use when they know they're entirely out of the loop but want to sound in charge. Elena just called me in absolute hysterics. She said you dragged Mia out of the house, and you're refusing to bring her back. I didn't drag her anywhere, I said, keeping my voice low, turning my back to the living room so Mia couldn't see my face. Mia walked out. I just opened the car door. She's 12, Clara. You don't let a 12-year-old dictate where she lives. You drive her back home right now. Soren, you have no idea what's going on here. Elena has been suffocating her. She sabotaged Mia's academy application because she was too scared to let her leave the state. Elena is sick, Clara. We both know that. But she has sole physical custody. Soren sighed, a heavy, impatient sound. I am not flying across the country to deal with a family court disaster because you decided to play hero. You are going to put Mia in your car, and you are going to drive her back to her mother. If you don't, Elena's lawyer is going to file an emergency ex parte order for custodial interference. Do you have any idea what that means? I closed my eyes. It means they arrest me. It means you get a felony charge, Soren corrected. Elena's lawyer is already drafting it. She gave you until sundown. Fix this, Clara, before you ruin your own life too. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. I looked out my kitchen window. The sun was getting low, casting long, harsh shadows across the pavement of my apartment complex. I had less than 2 hours. I turned around and looked at Mia. She had curled her legs up onto the sofa, resting her chin on her knees, looking smaller and more fragile than she had in years. I sat down on the opposite end of the cushion. The fabric of the sofa sank under my weight, but Mia didn't shift. She just kept staring at the blank screen. Your dad called, I said. My voice sounded thin, like paper tearing in a quiet room. Mia didn't blink. I figured. He talked to your mom's lawyer. I swallowed hard, trying to push past the lump of pure nausea sitting in my throat. Mia, if I don't take you back, they are going to file for an emergency custody order. They'll issue a warrant for me for custodial interference. She finally turned her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but she wasn't crying. There was a scary, adult kind of calculation happening behind them. Can they actually do that? Yes, it's a felony. I'd be arrested, and they would send the police here to get you anyway. I rubbed my face, feeling the exhaustion settling deep into my bones. I'm so sorry, kiddo. I am so sorry. I can't keep you here. I braced myself for the explosion. I expected her to scream, to call me a coward, to throw the glass of water at the wall. I wanted her to. I felt like I deserved it for giving her an hour of false hope just to yank it away. But she didn't. She just uncurled her legs, placed her feet flat on the floor, and picked up her heavy backpack. Okay, she said. That single word broke my heart more than any tantrum ever could. It was the sound of a kid who was already used to being let down by the adults who were supposed to protect her. The drive back to Elena's house was a suffocating nightmare. The sun was actively setting, casting long, dark orange streaks across the dashboard. We didn't turn the radio on. Every time I hit a red light, I looked over at the passenger seat. Mia was completely rigid, her hands gripping the canvas straps of her bag so tightly her knuckles were white. When I pulled onto Elena's street, the dread in the car was thick enough to choke on. I parked against the curb. The house was lit up like a beacon. Every single exterior light was blazing. The porch light, the garage floods, the path lights. Elena was standing behind the glass storm door. You don't have to get out, Mia said quietly, unbuckling her seatbelt. I'm walking you to the door, I replied. We walked up the concrete path together. When we reached the bottom of the porch steps, the heavy oak door swung inward. Elena didn't rush out to hug her daughter. She didn't drop to her knees and weep with relief. She stood exactly 1 inch behind the threshold line, her arms crossed over her chest, her face pale and drawn tight with fury. Mia walked up the steps and stopped right in front of her mother. Neither of them moved to initiate contact. Elena looked over Mia's shoulder, locking eyes with me. Her gaze was absolute ice. If you ever take my child out of this house without my explicit written permission again, I won't call Soren. I will call 911, and I will press charges. Elena, you have to listen to me. I don't have to listen to a damn thing you say, she hissed, her voice vibrating with barely contained rage. You used my daughter to punish me for my illness. You made her hate her own home. You're poison, Clara. You are absolute poison. She reached out, grabbed Mia by the shoulder strap of her backpack, and pulled her roughly inside. Mom, stop, Mia muttered, stumbling slightly over the threshold. You are not to contact her, Elena said, ignoring Mia entirely, still glaring at me. You are not to text her. You are not to drive past this house. You are done. She slammed the door. The deadbolt clicked. Then the chain slid into place. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time. The streetlights flickered on above me, buzzing with a low electrical hum. I looked up at Mia's bedroom window on the second floor. The blinds were already pulled tightly shut. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in helplessness. I went to work at the accounting firm every day, staring at spreadsheets until the numbers blurred into meaningless gray lines. I stopped sleeping. I kept my phone right next to my pillow, volume turned all the way up, waiting for a text or a call from Mia that never came. I tried calling Soren twice. The first time went straight to voicemail. The second time, he answered just to tell me that Elena had taken Mia's phone away indefinitely, and that I needed to respect the boundaries he and Elena had agreed upon. She's 12, Soren, I had argued, gripping the steering wheel of my parked car during my lunch break. She's isolated. Elena won't even let her go to a summer camp. Elena is homeschooling her for the summer to make sure she doesn't fall behind, Soren replied smoothly, parroting whatever script Elena had fed him. It's handled, Clara. Let it go. He hung up on me. I didn't let it go. I couldn't. On a Tuesday afternoon, I left work early and drove to the downtown office of a family law attorney I knew casually through the firm. His name was Holt, a pragmatic, no-nonsense guy in his 50s who specialized in high-conflict custody battles. I paid for a 1-hour consultation out of my own pocket, sitting in his leather chair and laying out the entire situation. The bank robbery 10 years ago, the agoraphobia, the isolation, the canceled STEM camp, the threat of the felony charge. Holt listened quietly, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finally ran out of breath, he set his pen down and looked at me with genuine pity. Clara, I'm going to give it to you straight, because letting you hold on to false hope is just going to cost you money you don't need to spend, Holt said, leaning back in his chair. You have zero legal standing. But she's harming her, I protested. She's locking her inside a house. Is the child bruised? Starving? Kept in a literal cage? No, but then Child Protective Services isn't going to remove a 12-year-old from a clean, climate-controlled home with a mother who feeds her and clothes her, Holt explained gently. Emotional suffocation isn't a crime. Agoraphobia is a documented medical disability. If you call CPs, Elena will show them the fully stocked fridge, her clean bedroom, and her remote learning curriculum. CPs will close the file in an hour, and Elena will immediately file for a permanent restraining order against you for harassment. What about grandparents' rights? Or aunts? Holt shook his head. In this state, third-party custody or visitation rights are incredibly difficult to obtain over the objection of a fit biological parent. Soren is the father. He agrees with Elena's boundaries. They present a united front. The court will view you as an interfering extended family member overstepping your bounds. So I just have to abandon her? I felt the tears prickling the corners of my eyes. I just have to let Elena break her spirit until she's completely hollow? You have to wait, Holt said softly. She's 12. In a few years, she can legally articulate a preference to a judge if a custody modification is filed. But until then, or until the father steps up to file for primary custody himself, your hands are tied. If you push this, you will end up in handcuffs. I left his office feeling completely hollowed out. I drove home in a daze, the reality of my powerlessness settling over me like a lead blanket. For the rest of June, the silence from Elena's house was absolute. I didn't drive by. I didn't send mail. I obeyed the rules because I was terrified of making it worse for Mia. Then, on the 4th of July, the first crack in the wall appeared. It was a blistering hot Saturday. People were setting off fireworks in the neighborhood, the loud, concussive booms echoing off the apartment buildings. I was sitting on my balcony, nursing a warm beer, actively avoiding looking at the sky because it made me think of the astronomy club. My laptop chimed from the kitchen table. It was an email notification. I didn't rush to check it, assuming it was a holiday sale from some retail store. When I finally went inside to get another beer, I tapped the trackpad to wake the screen. It was an automated notification from the county library system. Your hold is ready for pickup. I frowned. I hadn't placed any holds. I clicked the email to open the full message. The following item is ready for pickup at the Main Street branch. An introduction to orbital mechanics and astrodynamics. Reserved under the shared family account of Clara and Mia. My breath caught in my throat. Years ago, when Mia was 7, I had set up a linked library account so I could check out oversized picture books for her when she went through her dinosaur phase. I had completely forgotten it existed. The account sent email notifications to my primary address whenever a hold was fulfilled. Mia had placed a hold. She didn't have her phone. She didn't have the internet at her disposal without Elena hovering over her shoulder monitoring her remote learning. But the library system had an ancient ancient, text-based catalog interface that could be accessed through the basic e-reader Elena had bought her for homeschooling literature. I stared at the screen. The Main Street branch was 5 miles from Elena's house. Mia couldn't drive. Elena couldn't leave the porch. There was no physical way for Mia to pick up that book, unless she wasn't actually trying to get the book. I looked at the timestamp on the hold request. She had placed it yesterday at 2:15 p.m. She knew the notification would come to my email. She knew I would see it. It wasn't a request for reading material. It was a flare shot into the dark. She was telling me she was still there. She was still looking up. I grabbed my keys and my wallet. I didn't know what I was going to do, but sitting in my apartment suddenly felt impossible. I drove to the Main Street branch. It was closed for the holiday. The glass doors locked tight, a small plastic flag taped to the window. I sat in my car in the empty parking lot, staring at the building, my mind racing. If Mia was using the library catalog as a backdoor way to signal me, I had to figure out how to signal back without triggering Elena's surveillance. On Monday morning, during my lunch hour, I went back to the library. I walked up to the circulation desk and handed the librarian my ID. I have a hold to pick up, I said, under Clara. The librarian, an older woman with thick glasses, typed the name into her computer. She retrieved the heavy, dark blue textbook on orbital mechanics from the shelf behind her and slid it across the counter. Is there a way to leave a message on the account? I asked, keeping my voice casual, like a note on the digital ledger. My niece shares the account, and I want to recommend a book to her. We don't really have a messaging system, the librarian said, scanning the barcode. But you can create a public reading list on the online portal and share the link, or you can just place another hold for her. If I place a hold, does it show up on her e-reader when she syncs it? Yes, it should populate in her upcoming holds queue immediately. I nodded slowly, a plan forming in my chest. Okay, I'd like to place a hold on a book, please. Sure, what's the title? I had to think fast. It couldn't be anything obvious. It couldn't be a book about toxic mothers or running away. Elena monitored the e-reader's history. It had to be something that looked completely innocuous to Elena, but meant everything to Mia. Do you have a copy of The Martian by Andy Weir? I asked. The librarian typed. Yes, we have several copies. You want the physical book or the ebook? The ebook, I said. Put it on hold for the shared account. In The Martian, the main character is stranded millions of miles from home, completely isolated, with no way to communicate. But he figures out a way to hack a broken rover to send hexadecimal codes back to Earth. He finds a way to talk. It was Mia's favorite movie. We had watched it together 3 times. All set, the librarian smiled. It should download to the device the next time it connects to Wi-Fi. Thank you, I said, grabbing the orbital mechanics textbook. I went back to work and spent the rest of the afternoon obsessively checking my email, waiting to see if Mia would catch the signal. I knew Elena usually made Mia do her online reading assignments after dinner, around 7 p.m. At 7:42 p.m., my phone buzzed on my desk. I opened my inbox. There was a new automated message from the library. Your hold request has been canceled by the user. My heart sank. Had Elena seen it? Had she realized what I was doing and deleted it? 30 seconds later, another email arrived. The following item has been placed on hold under the shared family account, The Great Escape by Paul Brickhill. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a month. Mia had seen it. She understood. We spent the next week communicating entirely through library catalog holds. A bizarre, silent conversation hidden in plain sight. I would place a hold on Patience by Victoria Scott. She would cancel it and place a hold on The Long Walk by Stephen King. I would hold Hang in There by various authors. She would hold The Prisoner of Cell 25. It was agonizingly slow, and we couldn't exchange actual information, but it kept me sane. It kept me anchored to her. I knew she was fighting, mentally, against the walls Elena was building around her. But a week into our covert book title communication, the emails abruptly stopped. I waited 2 days. Nothing. I placed 3 different holds, trying to prompt a response. Nothing was canceled. Nothing new was added. On Thursday evening, I was pacing my kitchen, debating whether I should risk calling Soren again to demand a welfare check, when my cell phone rang. It wasn't Soren. It was a local number I didn't recognize. I answered it immediately. Hello, Clara? The voice was male, deep, and slightly hesitant. Yes, who is this? This is Professor Declan from the university, he said. Mia's astrophysics instructor. I stopped pacing. Professor Declan. Hi, I'm sorry. Mia had to withdraw from the seminar a few months ago, I know. He interrupted gently. I'm not calling about her enrollment. I'm calling because I received something in the mail at the faculty department today. It was addressed to me, but there was a sealed envelope inside with your name on it. My blood ran cold. A letter? Yes. It has Mia's handwriting on the front. I remembered you were the one who always brought her to the lectures, so I looked up your contact information in her emergency file before her mother had it purged from the system. He paused, the line crackling slightly. Clara, I don't want to overstep, but the envelope feels heavy, and the postmark is from a town 3 hours north of here. 3 hours north? I repeated, my fingers tightening around the edge of the kitchen counter. Elena doesn't leave her porch. She didn't mail anything. I know, Declan said quietly. That's why I'm calling you. I'm in my office at the science building. I'll be here until 6. I'm leaving right now. I didn't bother changing my clothes. I grabbed my keys, locked my apartment, and ran down the stairs. The drive to the university took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. The campus was mostly empty, the heavy summer heat keeping the summer session students indoors. I parked illegally in a loading zone behind the physics department, killed the engine, and sprinted up the concrete steps to the 3rd floor. Professor Declan's door was propped open with a rubber wedge. He was sitting at his desk, a man in his late 40s with tired eyes and a beard that was starting to gray at the edges. When he saw me hovering in the doorway, he stood up immediately. He didn't ask questions. He just reached into his top drawer and pulled out a standard brown padded mailing envelope. He slid it across the desk. I looked down at it. My name, Clara, was written across the front in thick black Sharpie. It was undeniably Mia's handwriting, neat and blocky, the way she always labeled her lab notebooks. The postmark stamped over the postage label read Windham County, July 10. Windham County was a heavily forested, rural district up near the state border. There was nothing up there but pine trees, logging roads, and a few isolated towns. I haven't opened it, Declan said, his voice low. The outer envelope was addressed to me, care of the department. Inside was just this, and a sticky note that said, please give to my Aunt Clara. Nothing else. Thank you, I breathed, my hands shaking as I picked it up. It was heavy. It felt like there was a small book inside. Clara, Declan said as I turned to leave. I stopped and looked back. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. Mia is a brilliant kid, once in a generation kind of bright, but she always had this underlying anxiety, like she was waiting for the floor to drop out from under her. Whatever is happening, if you need someone to vouch for her character or her state of mind, you call me. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak, and walked out. I didn't wait until I got home. I sat in my sweltering car, the act blasting but doing nothing to cool the sweat on my neck, and ripped the padded envelope open. A thick stack of notebook paper fell out into my lap, folded over 3 times, and with it came a small, heavy object that hit the floor mat by my pedals with a dull clack. I leaned down and picked it up. It was a piece of raw quartz, the size of a golf ball. It was the exact rock Mia had chipped out of a dry riverbed when she was 9 years old on our very first weekend geology hike. She had carried it in her pocket every day for a year. I unfolded the papers. The handwriting was rushed, the ink smudged in places where the pen had pressed too hard against the paper. Aunt Clara, if you're reading this, it means the girl who left on Wednesday actually mailed it for me. I traded her my silver necklace to do it. I hope it worked. Mom found out about the library. I don't know how. She must have guessed my password for the portal and checked the hold history. When she saw the books, she didn't even yell. She just closed the laptop, went into her bedroom, and locked the door. She was in there for 2 days on the phone. On Tuesday morning, Dad showed up. He didn't even say hi. He walked into my room while I was getting dressed, took my phone off the charger, and put it in his pocket. He told me to pack a suitcase. When I asked why, he said Mom couldn't handle my defiance anymore, and that I was having a psychiatric crisis. He said the library thing proved I was trying to communicate with dangerous people online, and that my obsession with the outdoors was a flight risk manifestation. They pathologized me, Clara. They used Mom's therapy words on me. Dad drove me 3 hours north. I'm at a place called the Callaway Center. It looks like a boarding school, but it's not. It's a behavioral modification facility for troubled teens. There are heavy magnets on the exterior doors. They took my shoelaces. They took my books. I am on a communications blackout for the first 60 days. No phone calls, no internet, no letters. They say it's to detoxify my familial attachments. Mom signed the papers. Dad paid the deposit. They told the intake counselor I was suffering from delusions and oppositional defiance disorder. Mom isn't trying to keep me safe. She put me here because if I'm here, I can't go anywhere else. I am just as trapped as she is now. It's perfectly quiet. There are no stars here. The windows have frosting on the glass so we can't look outside. Please. Dad signed primary physical custody back to Mom to get out of dealing with me, but he's the one paying for it. You have to find a way to make him stop paying. Don't come here. The front gate guard won't let you in, and if Mom finds out you know where I am, she'll just move me to a place out of state. I am keeping my head down. I am doing the breathing exercises. I am pretending to be fixed. I still look up, even if I can't see anything. Mia, I sat in my car for a long time. The paper was trembling in my hands. My older brother Soren had flown into town, kidnapped his own daughter under the guise of parental authority, and locked her in a behavioral facility because his agoraphobic ex-wife couldn't handle the fact that her daughter wanted to read books about space, and the law protected them completely. I picked up my phone and dialed Holt, the family attorney I had consulted weeks ago. He answered on the third ring. Holt, it's Clara. Clara, did you do something stupid? No, I said, my voice eerily calm. Soren put Mia in the Callaway Center up in Windham County. It's a lockdown facility. Elena authorized it. I heard Holt exhale slowly. Callaway, yeah, I know it. High-end place, usually for kids caught with hills or chronic runaways. It's a fully accredited therapeutic boarding school. She's not a runaway. She's a straight-A student who likes astrophysics. Doesn't matter, Holt said flatly. Elena is the custodial parent. Soren has joint legal. If both parents agree that the child requires intensive behavioral intervention and a private facility accepts the intake assessment, they have the absolute right to place her there. It's medical and educational discretion. You can't touch it. They're lying about her mental state to keep her locked up. Can you prove it? Holt asked. Do you have a psychiatrist willing to testify that Mia is perfectly fine? Because I guarantee you Callaway has an in-house doctor who already signed a piece of paper saying she suffers from oppositional defiance. And a judge will listen to the doctor at the facility, not the aunt. So she's just a prisoner. She's a minor whose parents made a legal medical decision, Holt corrected, trying to keep the pity out of his voice. Clara, I'm sorry, but if you drive up there, they will turn you away at the gate. If you make a scene, they will call the county sheriff, and you will be arrested for trespassing and harassment, and it will permanently destroy any future chance you have of seeing her. What if Soren stops paying? I asked, looking down at Mia's letter. You have to find a way to make him stop paying. Callaway is private. If the tuition stops, they discharge the patient back to the custodial parent. But why would Soren stop paying? He agreed to it. Because Soren is notoriously cheap, I said. He works middle management logistics in Seattle. He drives a leased Honda. He pays the bare minimum in child support. There is no way in hell he is fronting the cash for a high-end lockdown facility out of his own pocket. Holt was quiet for a moment. Private behavioral centers usually run between $8,000 to $12,000 a month, plus a massive intake deposit. Exactly. I stared out the windshield at the brick wall of the physics building. Soren isn't paying for this. Elena is. Elena hasn't worked a full-time job in a decade, but she got a settlement, I said, the memory suddenly slotting into place. 10 years ago, the bank robbery. The credit union's insurance paid out a massive victims' compensation settlement to avoid a lawsuit for lack of security. Elena got nearly $500,000. It's been sitting in a trust ever since. She never touched it because she has no expenses. Soren must be acting as the proxy to pay the facility so Elena doesn't have to deal with the wire transfers. Okay, Holt said slowly. Assuming that's true, how does that help you? I'm an accountant, I said. Clara, do not commit financial fraud. I don't need to commit fraud. I just need to figure out exactly how the money is moving. I need a thread to pull. I hung up before Holt could give me any more ethical warnings. I drove straight to the office. It was 5:30 p.m. Most of the senior partners had already left for the day, and the junior staff were packing up their bags. I walked to my cubicle, dropped my purse on the floor, and booted up my computer. I didn't have access to Elena's personal banking, obviously, but I had something else. 7 years ago, right after the divorce, Elena had been in such a state of panic over managing the house finances alone that she had asked me to help her set up her tax profile. I had created an online account for her with the state treasury to manage her property taxes. I opened an incognito browser window and navigated to the county property tax portal. I typed in her address. The public record popped up immediately. Elena's property taxes for the year were paid in full, but the public record showed the routing data for the payment source. It was a standard feature to confirm the escrow or bank origin. The payment hadn't come from her usual checking account at the local credit union. It had come from a private wealth management firm, Aldrich & Fenn. I leaned back in my chair. Aldrich & Fenn was a boutique firm downtown. They handled trusts, structured settlements, and large-scale wealth transfers. Elena was using the robbery settlement money. She was literally using the money she got from the worst trauma of her life to inflict trauma on her own daughter. I couldn't hack into Aldrich & Fenn, but I knew how structured settlements worked. They weren't just giant slush funds. They were heavily regulated, often requiring secondary authorization or specific tax reporting if large chunks were moved at once. If Elena was suddenly bleeding $10,000 a month to a facility like Callaway, it would trigger a tax event. I picked up my desk phone and dialed Soren's cell. He didn't answer. It went straight to his generic corporate voicemail. "Hi Soren, it's Clara," I said, keeping my tone light, professional, and entirely devoid of the murderous rage boiling in my chest. "I was just running some preliminary numbers for the family tax prep for the upcoming quarter. I noticed there's a significant new recurring expense for Mia's educational placement. Because you have joint legal custody, I need to know if you are claiming the Callaway Center as a medical deduction on your W-2s this year, or if Elena is claiming it against her settlement trust. If you both claim it, it's going to trigger an ears audit for dual claiming a dependent's medical expenses. Give me a call back so we can coordinate. Thanks." I hung up. It was a complete bluff. You couldn't dual claim it easily anyway, but Soren wasn't an accountant. Soren was a coward who hated dealing with bureaucracy and was terrified of the ears. 20 minutes later, my desk phone rang. Seattle area code. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Clara speaking. "What the hell are you talking about, an audit?" Soren demanded, skipping a greeting entirely. His voice was tight, anxious. "I'm not claiming anything. Elena is paying the tuition directly from the trust." "Got you. Okay, good to know," I said smoothly, opening a blank spreadsheet on my monitor just to have something to look at. I just needed to confirm. The intake fees for those places can be massive, usually around 20 or 30 grand. If it came out of your accounts, it would flag your debt to income ratio. I didn't pay the intake fee. Elena did. I just signed the custody transfer paperwork for the facility. Soren paused, and I could hear the faint hum of traffic in the background. He was probably driving home from work. "Look, Clara, I know you're pissed off, but this is for the best. Mia was completely out of control." Elena showed me the search history on that e-reader you two set up. She was looking at maps, bus routes, survival gear. She was going to run. My stomach turned. Mia hadn't been looking up bus routes to run away. She had been looking at them 3 months ago when she was desperately trying to figure out a way to get to the university campus for Professor Declan's lectures after Elena forced me to stop driving her. Elena had weaponized her daughter's dedication to school and framed it as a psychiatric breakdown. She wasn't running away, Soren. She was trying to get to her astrophysics class. Whatever she was doing, she's safe now, Soren said dismissively. The Callaway Center is secure. She's getting counseling, and Elena is finally sleeping through the night. It's a win for everybody. Just let the professionals do their job. Who signed the contract with Callaway? I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level. Did you sign the financial liability waiver? Or did Elena? Why does it matter? Because if Elena signed it, she's the financial guarantor. But she's agoraphobic. She couldn't have toured the facility. She couldn't have gone in person to sign the intake forms, which means you signed them. Silence on the line. Soren, I said softly. Did you sign the financial guarantor paperwork when you dropped her off? Elena sent an authorization letter, Soren said, his voice dropping an octave, getting defensive. I just signed the physical intake forms on site as the secondary guardian. It's standard procedure. Elena is the one transferring the funds from Aldrich and Fenn. I closed my eyes. He had no idea what he had done. He was so eager to dump the problem and get back to Seattle that he hadn't read the fine print. Soren, if you signed the physical intake forms as the delivering guardian, you are the legal guarantor on file. Private facilities require the physically present parent to assume liability in case of non-payment if Elena decides to stop paying, or if her trust administrators freeze the transfers because they exceed the yearly disbursement cap. Callaway won't sue Elena. They will sue you. That's bullshit. The money is coming from her account. It's coming from a structured settlement trust, Soren. Those trusts have annual withdrawal limits to protect the principal. 10 grand a month is $120,000 a year. Elena's settlement was under $500,000 10 years ago. If she hits the withdrawal cap, Aldrich and Fenn will legally block the next payment, and Callaway will come after your wages. I was half lying, half guessing, but I knew enough about corporate finance to make it sound entirely plausible. And I knew Soren. She wouldn't do that, Soren muttered, but the panic was bleeding through. She wouldn't do it on purpose. But she's not a financial planner. She's a woman who hasn't left her porch in a decade. If that tuition defaults, they garnish your logistics salary. Soren, I'll call her. He snapped and hung up. I set the phone down. I hadn't freed Mia. Not yet, but I had just thrown a live grenade into the fragile alliance between my brother and his ex-wife. The next morning I called in sick to work. I couldn't sit at a desk. I needed to see Elena's face. I drove to her house at 10:00 a.m. The neighborhood was quiet, sprinklers ticking over manicured lawns. Elena's house looked exactly the same. Blinds drawn, porch swept clean, utterly lifeless. I walked up the concrete steps. I didn't knock. I just stood on the porch, looking at the small black lens of the Ring doorbell camera mounted next to the frame. I knew she was inside. I knew she was watching the feed on her iPad. I know she's at Callaway, I said quietly, speaking directly to the camera lens. I know Soren took her, and I know you're using your victim's compensation money to pay for it. Silence. The small blue light ring around the doorbell camera pulsed, indicating the microphone was active. She is a 12-year-old girl, Elena. She is not your emotional support animal. You can't lock her in a box just because you're terrified of the sky. The speaker on the doorbell crackled. Elena's voice came through, distorted and tinny, but dripping with a cold, terrifying calm. She is sick, Clara. She caught your sickness. Always looking out. Always looking away. I am healing her. You're destroying her. You took away her shoelaces and her books. They are removing distractions. Elena's voice drifted through the speaker. The director there understands. They do grounding therapy. They keep them focused on the immediate environment. They teach them that the walls are safe. In 6 months, she won't even care about the stars anymore. She will understand that home is the only place that matters. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the summer heat. It wasn't just about control. Elena genuinely believed she was fixing Mia by forcing her into the same psychological prison she lived in. It was a horrifying, reverse-engineered exposure therapy. Soren isn't going to let you keep her there, I said to the camera. Not when he realizes he's the one legally on the hook for the money. Soren will do whatever I tell him to do, Elena replied flatly. Because if he tries to pull her out, I will file for a modification of child support based on my complete inability to work due to my documented disability. And I will take half his paycheck every month until Mia is 18. He knows that. The tuition is cheaper than the child support. We have an understanding. I stared at the black lens. She had thought of everything. She had weaponized her agoraphobia, her money, and Soren's greed. You're a monster, Elena. I'm a mother. The speaker crackled. Go home, Clara. You have no family here. The blue light clicked off. The microphone disconnected. I turned around and walked down the steps, my chest tight. I had tried the legal route. I had tried the financial financial bluff. Alina had checkmated me on both. I got back into my car and sat behind the wheel. I reached into my purse, pulled out the heavy padded envelope, and took out the piece of raw quartz. I rolled the stone over in my palm. The edges were sharp, unpolished. If I couldn't break the legal wall, and I couldn't break the financial wall, I had to break the physical one. Not by going up to Windham County and trying to scale a fence, but by finding the one person who actually had the authority to pull Mia out of that place, whether Elena liked it or not. I pulled out my phone and searched for the corporate directory of the Aldrich and Fenn Wealth Management firm. I bypassed the main reception number and scrolled until I found the listing for the senior partners. There was only one way to freeze a structured settlement trust indefinitely, and that was to prove to the wealth managers that the beneficiary was using the funds to commit active medical fraud. I clicked on the name Whitmore Cahill, Senior Trust Administrator, and pressed call. The line rang 3 times. Aldrich and Fenn, Office of Whitmore Cahill. This is Marin speaking. Hi Marin, this is Clara. I'm an accountant with the Fairfax firm over in the financial district. I need to speak with Mr. Cahill regarding an urgent compliance issue on a structured settlement trust he administers. The beneficiary is Elena. I gave her Elena's full legal name and her maiden name, just to be safe. There was a brief pause, the sound of a keyboard clacking. I see the account, Clara, but you aren't listed as a financial proxy. I can't transfer you without authorization from the client. I don't need authorization, Marin, because I'm not calling to ask for information. I am calling to provide it. You need to put me through, or I am going to email the state insurance commissioner and CC your compliance department about fraudulent medical disbursements being approved under Mr. Cahill's oversight. The keyboard clacking stopped instantly. Hold, please. The hold music was a smooth, looping jazz piano that made my teeth grind. It lasted for exactly 45 seconds before the line clicked over. This is Whitmore Cahill. The voice was polished, deep, and utterly devoid of warmth. I'm told you're alleging a compliance failure regarding one of my clients. I should inform you this call is being recorded, and any defamatory statements regarding this firm's fiduciary practices will be forwarded to our legal department. Record away, Whitmore, I said, leaning forward over my kitchen counter, staring at the raw quartz rock. You administer a victim's compensation settlement for Elena. For the past week, you have been authorizing large-scale electronic wire transfers to a private behavioral modification facility in Windham County called the Callaway Center. The transfers are being categorized as exempt medical expenses. I cannot confirm or deny any disbursements. I don't need you to confirm them. I already have the property tax routing data that links your firm to her primary expenditures, and I know exactly what Callaway charges. I cut him off. Here is the compliance issue. The minor child currently housed at that facility does not have a valid psychiatric diagnosis. The intake was predicated on fabricated behavioral logs submitted by the mother, who has documented untreated agoraphobia and hasn't seen a licensed medical professional in 9 years. If a child is admitted to an accredited facility, they undergo an intake evaluation by a staff physician, Whitmore said smoothly. If the facility accepts the placement and bills the trust, the disbursement is legally sound. We are not doctors, Clara. We are fund managers. The delivering parent, Soren, signed the physical intake forms. I countered, my voice hardening. But Soren doesn't have primary physical custody. Elena does. And Elena wasn't there. If your trust is paying out $10,000 a month for a medical placement that the custodial parent wasn't physically present to authorize, and the facility is drugging a 12-year-old girl based on a falsified medical history to keep her compliant, that is medical fraud. And your firm is the financial engine making it possible. Silence, heavy, calculating silence. Whitmore Cahill was a numbers guy. He didn't care about Mia. He didn't care about Elena's agoraphobia. But he cared deeply about the SEC, the state medical board, and the structural integrity of his firm's reputation. Structured settlements predicated on victim compensation have very strict disbursement criteria, Whitmore said carefully, choosing every word as if he were walking across a minefield. If a beneficiary is found to be utilizing trust funds for elective or fraudulent internment, the trust administrators have a legal obligation to freeze all secondary distributions until an independent audit is conducted. Then freeze it. I cannot freeze a client's lifeline based on an angry phone call from an unauthorized third party, Clara, Whitmore said. His tone had shifted. The polished armor was still there, but there was a crack in it. He was giving me the roadmap. In order to initiate a compliance hold, my department requires documented proof of fraud, not an accusation. A court-admissible document contradicting the medical necessity of the placement, a sworn affidavit from a doctor, a police report, a formal grievance filed with a state regulatory board. Give me paper, Clara, otherwise, this conversation never happened. He hung up. I lowered the phone. I needed paper. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my dining table with a yellow legal pad, drafting a timeline of every single event over the last 6 months. The astronomy club, the university seminar, the science symposium, the canceled STEM camp. I wrote down the dates, the locations, the names of the people involved. Professor Declan, Adele, the judges at the county convention center. By 6 a.m. my eyes were burning and my hands were cramped. But I had a plan. I just needed to survive the workday first. I showered, put on a gray tailored suit, and drove to my accounting firm in the financial district. I planned to use my lunch hour to drive to the university and get Professor Declan to draft a formal, notarized letter regarding Mia's exceptional psychological stability. I figured with his academic credentials, it would be enough to trigger Whitmore Cahill's compliance hold. I walked into the bullpen at 8:45 a.m. The office was already humming with the low murmur of phone calls and the sharp clatter of keyboards. I poured a cup of terrible office coffee, walked to my cubicle, and sat down. At 9:15 a.m., the receptionist, a young woman named Sloan, walked down my aisle. She looked deeply uncomfortable. Clara, there's a guy in the lobby asking for you. He says he has a delivery, but he won't leave it at the desk. He says it has to be direct signature. I frowned. I hadn't ordered anything. Did he say what company? No. Sloan lowered her voice. He's not wearing a uniform. He's just wearing a cheap suit. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles out of my skirt, and walked toward the glass-walled reception area. A man with thinning hair and a bored expression was standing near the potted ficus, holding a thick manila envelope. Clara? He asked as I approached. Yes. He handed me the envelope. You've been served. He didn't wait for a reaction. He turned around, pushed through the glass doors, and got into the elevator. I stood in the middle of the lobby, acutely aware of Sloan watching me from behind her monitor. I ripped the seal on the envelope and pulled out a heavy stack of legal documents printed on thick, watermarked paper. The top page was a temporary restraining order and notice of hearing. Below that, a civil petition for damages, tortious interference with familial relations, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The petitioner was Elena. I flipped through the pages, my heart hammering against my ribs. Her lawyer had been busy. The injunction demanded that I remain 500 feet away from Elena's residence, Mia's school, and any medical facility where Mia was currently receiving treatment. It specifically listed the Callaway Center. It barred me from contacting them via phone, email, mail, or third-party intermediaries, but it was the civil suit that made the blood roar in my ears. Elena wasn't just trying to keep me away. She was suing me for $50,000 in damages, claiming my obsessive and erratic behavior had actively triggered her medical disability and forced her to seek expensive inpatient psychiatric care for her daughter, Clara. I looked up. Bastian, the senior managing partner of the firm, was standing in the doorway of his corner office. He was a ruthless, fastidious man in his 60s who wore custom Italian suits and demanded absolute professionalism from his staff. He was looking at the legal documents in my hands. My office. Now, he said. I followed him into the corner office. He shut the door behind us, muting the sounds of the bullpen. I just got a very unpleasant phone call from a family law attorney representing your sister-in-law, Bastian said, walking around his massive mahogany desk. He didn't offer me a seat. He informed me that a process server was downstairs and that you are currently embroiled in a severe domestic dispute involving the harassment of a disabled woman and a minor child. It's a retaliatory filing, Bastian, I said quickly, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. My brother and his ex-wife locked my niece in a behavioral facility to punish her, and I'm trying to get her out. The harassment claim is a lie. I don't care if it's a lie, Bastian said flatly. I care about the reputation of this firm. We manage the tax portfolios for half the local government and 3 major hospital networks. The lawyer on the phone strongly implied that if you continued to use company time and company resources to conduct a personal vendetta, and he specifically mentioned you making threatening calls to a wealth management firm during business hours, he would subpoena our telecom records. I froze. Whitmore Cahill had recorded my call. He hadn't just filed it away, he had notified Elena's lawyer. Bastian, I have a spotless record here. I bring in 20% of the quarterly billing for this floor. And right now, you are a liability, Bastian replied, his tone final. You're clearly not focused on your accounts. You're emotionally compromised. I am placing you on an immediate, unpaid administrative leave for the next 4 weeks. Go home, Clara. Hire a lawyer. Sort out your family disaster. Do not come back into this building until that restraining order is quashed. He turned his back to me and looked out the window. I was dismissed. I walked back to my cubicle, packed my laptop, my coffee mug, and my notebook into my bag, and walked out of the building. I didn't cry. I was too angry to cry. I drove back to my apartment, threw my bag onto the sofa, and spread the legal documents across the kitchen island. I needed to find a flaw. I needed to find the lie that I could prove. I flipped past the boilerplate injunction language and found the sworn affidavit submitted by Elena to justify the emergency order. I began to read. I, Elena, being duly sworn, depose and state, over the past 6 months, my former sister-in-law, Clara, has engaged in a systematic campaign of psychological manipulation against my minor daughter, Mia. Clara has intentionally fostered a hostile environment within my home, mocking my documented medical disability and encouraging Mia to exhibit violent, oppositional defiance. On May 12, following a sanctioned school event, Mia returned to my residence in a state of severe delusion. When I attempted to implement standard disciplinary boundaries, Mia became physically aggressive, throwing household objects and expressing self-harm ideation. She repeatedly stated she wanted to escape and disappear into the dark. Due to the immediate threat she posed to herself and others, and upon consultation with her father, Soren, we were forced to secure an emergency psychiatric placement at the Callaway Center. I stared at the paper. May 12th. May 12th was the night of the Regional Science Symposium. The night Mia won the $500 grant. The night she thanked me into the microphone instead of her mother. Elena hadn't just lied about Mia being violent. She had taken Mia's absolute brightest, most triumphant moment, and legally redefined it as a psychiatric breakdown. She had taken Mia's poetic love for astronomy, wanting to disappear into the dark, and twisted it into documented suicidal ideation. It was brilliant. It was vile. And it was perjury. I grabbed my phone and called Holt. I told you not to do anything stupid, Holt answered, sighing heavily into the receiver. I didn't. She did, I said. Elena filed a temporary restraining order and a civil suit against me. I was just served at my office. I've been put on administrative leave. Damn it, Clara, send me the PDF of the filing. I'll enter an appearance as your counsel and see if we can get the civil suit dismissed at the preliminary hearing. But you have to stay away from her. I don't care about the restraining order, Holt. I want you to read her affidavit. She perjured herself. Every affidavit in family court is 90% fiction, Holt said wearily. Proving perjury is nearly impossible unless you have a smoking gun. I have a smoking gun, I said, my finger tapping aggressively on the kitchen counter. Elena swore under oath that on the night of May 12th, Mia came home in a state of severe delusion and became physically aggressive. She claims that's what necessitated the psychiatric placement. And on May 12th, Mia was standing in front of 300 people at the county convention center, presenting a 3D printed Mars rover to a panel of aerospace engineers. She was perfectly lucid. She was articulate. She was awarded a $500 academic grant. The entire event was recorded and live-streamed by the county school board. Holt was quiet for a long moment. Are you sure of the date? I'm looking at Elena's sworn signature right now. She got greedy. She wanted to specifically punish Mia for what happened that night, so she cited that exact date as the inciting incident for the breakdown. If I pull the video footage from the school board, I can prove Mia was entirely stable and high-functioning hours before Elena claims she became violent and delusional. That proves she was fine at the convention center, Holt argued, playing devil's advocate. It doesn't prove she didn't have a meltdown when she got home. Yes, it does. Because a kid doesn't go from presenting high-level orbital mechanics to a panel of judges to suffering from a sudden onset, reality-breaking psychiatric delusion in a 30-minute car ride, unless they ingested a hallucinogen. The timeline is medically absurd. If we submit the video footage to the state medical board alongside Elena's affidavit, it proves the mother fabricated the behavioral history. You want to go to the medical board? I want to file a formal grievance against the intake physician at Callaway, I said, my voice dropping to a low, hard register. I want to attach the video, Elena's affidavit, and a statement from Professor Declan. If the medical board opens an investigation into the facility for fraudulent admission practices, Whitmore Cahill at Aldrich and Fenn will be legally obligated to freeze the settlement trust paying the tuition. Clara, if you file a grievance grievance with the medical board, you are declaring war on a multi-million-dollar private facility. They will unleash their corporate lawyers on you. They will bury you in litigation. I don't have a job to go to tomorrow, Holt, I said. I have nothing but time. Draft the grievance, Holt said finally. Bring it to my office tomorrow morning. Do not submit it until I review it. And Clara, do not call Soren. I won't, I lied. I hung up the phone. I looked at the time. It was 3 p.m. on the West Coast. Soren would still be in his office. I opened my laptop, went to the county school board's website, and found the archived live stream of the May 12th Science Symposium. I clipped the 4-minute segment of Mia presenting her rover, speaking clearly and brilliantly about Martian topography. I downloaded the file. Then, I drafted a quick email to Soren's corporate address. I didn't write a subject line. I just attached the video file and the PDF of Elena's sworn affidavit. I typed one single sentence in the body of the email. This is what you signed the intake papers for. I hit send. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Soren. I let it go to voicemail. He called right back. I answered on the second ring, not saying a word. What is this? Soren's voice was tight, thin, vibrating with a nervous energy that sounded dangerously close to panic. It's proof that you are an accessory to medical fraud, I said simply. Elena filed a restraining order against me today. She attached an affidavit swearing Mia was delusional and violent on May 12th. I'm taking her affidavit and the video of Mia from that exact night to the state medical board tomorrow morning. I'm filing a grievance against Calloway for accepting a fraudulent psychiatric admission. Clara, stop. Stop right now. Why? Because you're scared? I stood up, pacing the length of my kitchen. You should be. When the medical board investigates, they're going to pull the intake file. And whose signature is going to be right there on the dotted line, swearing that the child he dropped off was a danger to herself. Yours. I didn't read the behavioral history, Soren practically shouted, his composure shattering. Elena sent it directly to the director. I just signed the custody transfer. The medical board doesn't care if you didn't read it. You signed it as the delivering parent. You authorized the chemical restraint of a minor based on a lie. I let that sink in, listening to his ragged breathing over the line. They are going to drug her, Soren. If she's diagnosed with oppositional defiance and delusions, they will put her on antipsychotics to keep her quiet. Is that what you want? Are you going to let your ex-wife medicate your daughter into a zombie just so you don't have to pay child support? I'm not doing this for the money. Then prove it. How? He asked, his voice cracking. Elena has the money. Elena has primary custody. The facility won't even let me speak to Mia on the phone because I'm not the primary medical proxy. You have joint legal custody, I said. You have the right to demand an independent third-party medical evaluation. You call the director of Calloway tomorrow morning. You tell him that you believe the intake behavioral logs provided by the mother were falsified, and you are officially revoking your consent for any pharmaceutical intervention until Mia is evaluated by a court-appointed psychiatrist. If I do that, the facility will suspend her enrollment. They'll discharge her. Exactly. They'll kick her out because she's a liability. And then what, Clara? Soren demanded, sounding utterly defeated. She goes right back to Elena's house. Elena will just lock the doors, pull the blinds, and we're back exactly where we started. Except this time, Elena will legally bar me from seeing her too. If Calloway discharges her due to conflicting parental consent and suspected medical fraud, it creates a paper trail, I explained, the accountant in me meticulously laying out the ledger. It proves the placement was disputed. That gives Holt the leverage to file an emergency ex parte motion for a change of custody. A change of custody to who? Me? Soren laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Seattle. I travel 3 weeks out of the month for logistics coordination. I can't take a 12-year-old girl. I know you can't, I said softly. But if you file for primary custody, you can designate a temporary guardian while you transition. You designate me. Silence hung on the line, heavy and suffocating. Soren knew I was right. He knew he had abandoned Mia to a woman who was slowly suffocating her, and he had looked the other way because it was easy. Now, the bill was coming due. Elena will destroy you, Soren whispered. If you try to take Mia legally, Elena will spend every dime of that settlement money to ruin your life. She already got you suspended from your job. I don't care about my job. You don't understand how deep her panic goes, Clara. If she thinks you're actually going to take Mia away permanently, she won't just fight you in court. She'll do something drastic. She thinks the outside world is a meat grinder. She would rather see Mia destroyed inside that house than let her walk out the front door. Are you going to call the facility, Soren? I asked, ignoring his warning. A long, agonizing pause. I'll call them in the morning, he said, and he hung up. I set the phone down. My hands were shaking, a fine, high-frequency tremor that traveled all the way up my forearms. I had forced Soren's hand. I had the affidavit. I had the video. The dominoes were finally lined up, but Soren's warning echoed in the quiet of my apartment. She would rather see Mia destroyed inside that house than let her walk out the front door. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. The sun had set, the streetlights casting long orange pools across the pavement. A dark gray sedan was parked directly across from my building. It wasn't a police cruiser. It wasn't an unmarked detective car. It was just an ordinary, late-model sedan. But the engine was idling, the exhaust pluming softly in the cool evening air, and the person sitting in the driver's seat was staring straight up at my second-floor window. I took a step back, letting the curtain fall shut. Elena hadn't left her porch in 9 years. She couldn't drive. She couldn't come here herself, but she had $500,000, and she knew exactly where I lived. I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood there in the dark, watching the sedan through the slit in the curtains. A few minutes later, the driver rolled down his window and sparked a lighter for a cigarette. The brief, orange flare illuminated a heavy DSLR camera sitting on his passenger seat, a private investigator. Elena hadn't sent someone to hurt me. She had sent someone to catch me. She was paying a professional $100 an hour to sit outside my apartment, hoping I would do something erratic. She wanted me to have a meltdown. She wanted me to get in my car, drive to her house, and violate the temporary restraining order so she could call the police and have me arrested. She was using her settlement money to build a perimeter around me, trying to bait me into a mistake. I let the curtain fall shut. I walked into my bedroom, set my alarm for 6 in the morning, and went to sleep. I wasn't going to give her a show. I was going to give her a paper trail. At 8 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting in Holt's waiting room with a manila folder resting on my lap. He walked through the glass doors at 1:15, holding a thermos of coffee, and raised his eyebrows when he saw me. I told you not to do anything stupid, Clara. I didn't, I said, standing up. I did the paperwork. I followed him into his office. I didn't sit down. I opened the folder and laid the documents out on his desk. First, the official grievance addressed to the state medical board regarding the Calloway Center's intake physician. Second, the printed PDF of Elena's sworn affidavit from the restraining order, specifically highlighting her claim that Mia was violently delusional on the evening of May 12th. Finally, a flash drive containing the county school board's 4-minute video of Mia presenting her Mars rover at the symposium on that exact date. Holt put his glasses on. He read the grievance. Then he read Elena's affidavit. He picked up the flash drive, plugged it into his computer, and clicked the file. The audio of Mia's clear, confident voice filled the quiet office. She was explaining the suspension mechanics of her rover, smiling at the judges. Holt watched the entire 4 minutes. When the video ended, he closed the window and leaned back in his leather chair. He took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. She specifically cited May 12th in a sworn legal document, Holt said softly, almost to himself. She perjured herself to get the restraining order, I said. And she used that same fabricated behavioral history to get the facility to sign off on a psychiatric hold. It's bulletproof, Holt admitted, looking at the papers. Elena got arrogant. She thought because the family court moves so fast on emergency ex parte motions, nobody would bother to verify the date. If I file this grievance and attach these exhibits, the medical board will absolutely open an inquiry into Callaway. And the moment Callaway gets notified of a licensing inquiry, their legal department is going to realize they admitted a minor, based on fraudulent parental testimony. File it, I said. Clara, the moment I file this, the civil suit Elena filed against you is going to turn into a bloodbath. She will double down. I don't care. File it. I need the stamped copy. Holt looked at me for a long moment, assessing the absolute certainty in my voice. He picked up his desk phone and hit a speed dial button for his paralegal. Marin, I need you to courier a grievance packet to the state medical board downtown. Ask for expedited processing, and bring me back the date-stamped receipt. It took 2 hours. I sat in the waiting room the entire time. When the paralegal returned, she handed me a photocopy of the grievance, stamped in red ink by the state regulatory office. I took a picture of the stamped document with my phone. I attached it to an email, along with the affidavit and the video file. I sent it directly to Whitmore Cahill at Aldrich and Fenn. My subject line was simple: court admissible documentation of medical fraud regarding Elena's structured settlement trust. I hit send at 11:15 a.m. At 11:42 a.m., my phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was from Whitmore Cahill. Documentation received and reviewed by our legal department. Compliance hold initiated on the client's account pending an external audit. All recurring disbursements have been frozen effective immediately. The money was gone. I walked out of Holt's office and drove to a diner down the street. I ordered a black coffee and sat in a booth near the back. Now, there was nothing to do but wait for the pressure to crush the system. It took exactly 48 hours for the dominoes to fall. On Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Soren. What did you do? He asked. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was exhausted. It was the sound of a man who had finally hit a wall he couldn't step around. I told you what I was going to do, Soren. Callaway's accounting department called me an hour ago, Soren said, breathing heavily. They said Elena's tuition wire bounced. They asked for an alternate credit card to cover the balance. I told them no. I told them I was officially revoking my consent for Mia's medical treatment and demanding her immediate release. And what did they say? They panicked. The director got on the phone. He said they had just received a notice of inquiry from the state medical board regarding Mia's intake file. When I told him I refused to pay and I was pulling my consent, his tone changed completely. They don't want the liability, Clara. They don't want a kid in their facility whose parents are fighting a fraud case over her admission. They told me I have 24 hours to come get her, or they are discharging her to the county child welfare office. Are you at the airport? I asked. I'm at the gate in Seattle. My flight leaves in 20 minutes. I land at 6. I have to rent a car and drive 3 hours north to Windham County. Soren paused, the terminal announcements echoing faintly behind him. Elena is losing her mind. She tried to call the facility to override my discharge order, but they won't talk to her because her payment defaulted. She called me screaming, demanding I put Mia on a plane back to her house the second I pick her up. She can't leave her porch, Soren. She can't physically stop you from taking Mia anywhere else. I can't take her to Seattle, Clara, Soren said, his voice cracking with genuine desperation. I leave for a 2-week logistics circuit in Denver on Monday. I have no setup for a 12-year-old. I have nothing. Bring her to Holt's office tomorrow morning, I said quietly. 9 a.m. I'll have the temporary physical guardianship papers ready. You retain joint legal custody, but you sign physical placement over to me. It's a standard delegation of parental authority. Elena can fight it in family court later if she wants, but right now, it solves your immediate problem. You don't have to take her to Seattle, and you don't have to face Elena. Soren was quiet. I could hear the cowardice wrestling with the relief. I was offering him an exit door, and he was going to take it. 9 a.m. Soren agreed and hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the evening cleaning my apartment, making up the spare bed, and clearing out a dresser. I kept looking out the window, but the dark sedan was gone. Elena wasn't paying the private investigator anymore. She couldn't. Friday morning was overcast, the sky a heavy, bruised gray. I walked into Holt's office at 8:30. I paid his retainer fee with a cashier's check from my savings account. He had the delegation of authority forms printed and waiting on the conference table. At exactly 9:15, the heavy glass door of the reception area opened. Soren walked in first. He looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him. He was wearing a rumpled suit, his eyes bloodshot from the red-eye flight and the overnight drive. Behind him walked Mia. She was wearing the same clothes she had left in. She had her dark blue backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked thinner, her face pale and drawn, but when she saw me standing by the conference room door, she stopped. She didn't run to me. She didn't cry. She just let out a long, shuddering breath, her shoulders dropping 2 inches as the permanent tension she carried finally broke. Hi, kiddo, I said, my voice thick. Hi, Aunt Clara, she whispered. Soren didn't waste time. He walked into the conference room, sat down at the table, and picked up the pen. Holt pointed to the signature lines. Soren signed his name 3 times. He didn't read the fine print. He just wanted it over. The school district will need a copy of this for enrollment, Holt said, sliding a notary stamp over the paper. Clara is now the authorized physical guardian. If Elena wants to challenge this, she will have to file a formal petition for a custody modification hearing and appear before a judge. She won't appear, I said, looking at the stamped paper. She has to leave her house to go to the courthouse. Soren stood up. He looked at me, then looked at his daughter standing in the hallway. I'm going to the airport. I'll call you next week, Mia. Mia didn't say anything. She just nodded once. Soren walked out of the office, the door clicking shut behind him. He was gone, back to his clean, uncomplicated life. I walked out to the hallway. I knelt down so I was at eye level with Mia. I didn't reach out to hug her. I knew she hated being crowded when she was overwhelmed. I just looked at her. Are you okay? I asked. They took my shoelaces, she said quietly, her voice perfectly flat, and they made us sit in a circle and talk about why we were bad. But I didn't say anything. anything. I just did the math in my head. I calculated the orbital trajectory of the Mars rover over and over. I got your rock, I said. A small, genuine smile touched the corners of her mouth. The girl with the necklace came through. She did. I stood up and gently touched her shoulder. Let's go home. We walked out to my car. As I pulled out of the parking lot, my phone started ringing in the cup holder. It was Elena. I didn't silence it. I answered it and put it on speaker. You bring her back right now. Elena's voice came through the speaker, distorted, hysterical, trembling with a rage that bordered on absolute panic. She is my daughter, Clara. You stole her. You conspired with Soren. I will call the police. I will tell them you kidnapped her. Call them, I said calmly, keeping my eyes on the road. Call the police, Elena. Tell them to come to your house. Tell them to knock on your door. But when they get there, you'll have to open it. You'll have to step out onto the porch to talk to them. You'll have to go down to the station to file the report. Silence on the line, save for her ragged, hyperventilating breaths. She knew I had her. The bluff was called. Soren signed temporary guardianship over to me this morning. I continued, my voice steady and cold. The papers are filed. The trust is frozen. You have no money to pay lawyers, and you have no ability to physically come get her. It's over, Elena. You tried to drag her into the dark with you, but it didn't work. She needs me, Elena sobbed. A broken, desperate sound that almost made me pity her. No, Mia said suddenly from the passenger seat. She leaned closer to the phone. I don't need you. I just needed to get away from you. Mia reached over and pressed the red button on the screen. The call disconnected. The car was suddenly very quiet. Mia leaned back against the headrest and looked out the window. The gray clouds were finally breaking apart, letting harsh, bright shafts of late morning sunlight spill across the highway. She's going to be in that house forever, isn't she? Mia asked softly. Probably, I said. Mia nodded, watching the trees blur past. Good. We drove the rest of the way to my apartment in silence. When we got inside, Mia didn't sit rigidly on the sofa like she had the last time. She dropped her heavy backpack on the floor, kicked off her slip-on shoes, and walked straight over to the sliding glass door that led out to my small balcony. She unlocked it, pushed the screen aside, and stepped out. I stood in the kitchen and watched her. She walked to the railing and leaned her arms against the metal. She tilted her head back, closing her eyes as the sunlight hit her face. She didn't look down at the street. She didn't look at the shadows. She just stood there, breathing in the open air, and looked straight up at the sky.